Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Quantum Alignment Show. I'm really excited to talk about what we want to talk about today, and we're going to be exploring the outer edges of modern science, and we're going to be looking at epigenetics, the science of understanding gene regulation, ancestral memory, and human design, and how you can find in your human design chart clues to ancestral memories that may be influencing your sense of well-being, your health, your wellness, and more. Modern astrology and your DNA. One of the things that we are learning, cellular biologists and geneticists are teaching us, is that the mythology of your genes being your destiny is broken. This is a story that we know for a fact is not true. In fact, it's so not true that when scientists, when geneticists look at the gene code, and particularly when we look at the gene code in the context of genes creating disease or genes creating health and wellness, there are a very, very small number of genes, like 3% of the genes in your gene code or less, that are fixed and rigid. And if you have any kind of a deleterious mutation in any of those fixed and rigid genes, you will develop a disease such as Huntington's disease. And that's a rare, rare, rare example. We are not doomed by our DNA. Our DNA is not our fate. And in fact, what we know is that most of the DNA, and there's a heck of a lot of it, most of it is in a constant state of change. And most importantly, we have the power through our choices to influence the expression of our DNA. So if you have a DNA marker that points towards a family potential towards a certain disease, such as the BRCA gene markers for breast cancer in women and ovarian cancer in women. If you have those markers in your gene code, it does not mean that you are going to develop breast cancer or ovarian cancer. You have the ability, through changes in the way you experience your life, to increase the possibility that you could have a healthy, well, vibrant, dynamic, vital life in every area. Your DNA is like a script. And if you think about a script, I love this one because it's got all kinds of editing in it, right? If my oldest stepdaughter, who is a reflector, is also an actor. She's amazing. She's got a great voice. She's also, we joke in our family because she's kind of got like a rubber face. She can take, any kind of story and kind of make her face sort of match the story, right? And she's just a fabulous storyteller and a fabulous actor. When you think about acting, or you think about a manuscript or a story, the way in which you read that story changes the nature of the story, right? When I go read my daughter a bedtime story, I like to be really animated and into the story, and I do voices, and it's a really, really fun experience. Sometimes I'm whispering this, so I don't want my husband to hear it. Sometimes when my husband goes in to read a story, he's reading it in this really dead monotone, and he has a tendency to fall asleep while he's reading. So he literally can read the story while asleep, and it sounds something like this: Schmirkle, Merkle, Schmirkle, Merkle, Schmirkle, Schmirkle. So I know if he's fallen asleep because I usually hear a corresponding "Dad" out of the other room while she's trying to yell at him and wake him up, right? The point of this story is this. You can have a story, and it's just a plot outline, right? The way in which you read the story determines a lot of how we experience the story. Your DNA is like that plot outline, or it's like the manuscript. You can read that manuscript in an infinite number of different ways. The ways in which we read the script of our DNA are influenced by our psychological state, our diet, the seasons. And if you've ever heard of seasonal affectiveness disorder, that's when your mood is affected by the seasons. Your seasons will actually affect your DNA. Disease exposure, toxic chemicals, drugs of abuse, your financial status, exercise, your microbiome, your gut health, the health of the bacteria in your gut, which fluctuates from morning till night, depending on what you put in your body and your emotional state and your stress. Your gut biome are going to influence your gene expression. Therapeutic drugs can influence your gene expression. Quote unquote alternative medicines, which I like to call integrated medicine. Integrated medicine can influence how you read your DNA script and even your social interactions. Research shows that people who have friends are healthier and have better regulated gene expression. Go figure. If you make any kinds of changes in any of these parameters, it takes about 10 to 12 weeks for us to begin to see through the measurement of the gene expression of your cells and the health markers that we look at when we're assessing health and wellness. It takes 10 to 12 weeks to create lasting change in your gene expression. So that's basically like about 3 months of making some simple changes, oftentimes can actually create longevity. And it can actually create significant longevity. The more meaning and purpose people have in their lives, the healthier their telomeres are. These are markers on a cellular level. The telomeres indicate longevity, and they're important markers for looking at longevity. As we age, the telomeres get all frayed and kind of gross looking. The more meaning and the more health, the greater choices we make in our lives, the more we can influence the health of the caps of those telomeres, keep them intact longer, and it actually extends the length of our life. There's some promising new research that shows that we can actually even reverse aging. There have been some new research studies where they have used a compound called telomerase, and I cannot say that today. I should write it down. Telomerase can actually heal or restore the health of the telomeres, which are vital for cell separation and cell growth. And it can actually reverse aging. I think that we are going to begin to see, as we go deeper into this brand new field of science, that we can make lifestyle choices that can influence the health of our genes and increase the length of our lives in many different ways. Now, what we've also learned in the science of epigenetics is that when we look at gene regulation or epigenes, it's the epigenes that are the regulators of whether your DNA script is turned on or off. When we look at the science of epigenetics, we now know that you can carry ancestral memory. And that ancestral memory is cellular memory of events that happened in your genetic lineage for up to 14 generations before you were born. 14 generations. So in your cells, regulating the expression of your DNA right now, are ancestral memories that are on a biochemical level, on a genetic level. They are influencing whether the genes you are carrying are regulated and they are turned on or off in their expression. Now, if we go back 14 generations and we start to do the math around 14 generations, that means that there are 65,536 great-grandparents influencing your gene regulation. Now, later on, I'm going to explain to you that while that's there and that's influencing you, the truth is probably your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your great-great-grandparents are going to have the greatest amount of influence. And I'll explain to you why in a little bit. To understand human design and the relationship between human design, ancestral memory, and epigenetics, we have to go back to one of what I think is the more woo-woo, weird aspects of human design, but I love this part of human design. I hope you do too. We have to go back and explore the story of conception as told through the lens of human design. In human design, conception actually happens 8 hours before your parents got together physically. And the moment of conception is actually originated in the father, with the father's energy. So your father's energy, 8 hours before he gets together with your mom, Your father's energy calls forth what's called a design crystal. Now, I don't think if we did an autopsy that we'd find the actual design crystal. It's not necessarily a physical body, but it's a crystalline code of information that lives in the earth. And when that crystalline code of information is called forth, it's actually bundled with a second piece of information called the magnetic monopole, which I'll talk about in a minute. Your design crystal contains the code for your life story. So it's the code for who you're going to be, what your life, the predestined events that are part of your life story. It's going to contain the code for your life purpose and the code that actually builds your body, your genetics, and your ancestral memories, your epigenes. When we look at human embryology and how a baby grows from a sperm and an egg into a full-fledged baby when it's born, what embryologists are still stumped by today is they don't know how the cells differentiate into what they become. So we don't know how when a sperm and egg get together to make a blastosphere, a clump of undifferentiated cells, we don't know how they get from that undifferentiated state to become all the different cells that make up a full-fledged human body at birth. There are scientists, revolutionary evolutionary scientists such as Rupert Sheldrake, who hypothesize that we have what are called morphogenetic fields, subtle body templates or energy templates that set up the order for how we evolve physiologically. It's my theory that the design crystal, and of course this is all theory because nobody's actually found a design crystal yet, so take this in that vein. I'm not presenting this as science, I'm presenting this as the story of human design, but I do think there's some emerging body of science that does demonstrate that the morphogenetic field is a real thing. And that if we understand the nature of the morphogenic field, we also begin to understand that maybe evolution has a little bit more of a deliberate component to it than just this accidental survival of the fittest Darwinian thing that we've been talking about for the last 150 years. This morphogenetic field, or this subtle body template that is programmed by the design crystal, sets the stage for how your body will grow, what you're going to look like. And as I said, it also sets the stage for you embodying your ancestral memory on a cellular level. Bundled with this design crystal is another energy field called the magnetic monopole. The magnetic monopole is a magnet that only attracts, it has one pole. And I throw this in here just because when I first started teaching human design and we talked about magnetic monopoles, scientists thought that they might exist. They were a hypothesis that they could be a potential thing, but they had not yet discovered them. So scientists did actually discover magnetic monopoles. They are actually a thing, a monopoled magnet. And there are magnets that only attract, and there are magnets that I guess only repel, maybe. I don't know about that, but there are magnets that only attract. That magnetic monopole has the job of working with your design crystal, your life story, and it attracts into your life all of those experiences that match your life story and help you live out your life story. The magnetic monopole can be calibrated. Your consciousness, your personal growth and evolution, the work you've done up until this point in your life to change your point of creation and attraction is all about influencing the magnetic monopole, which is, by the way, a very different conversation that we're not going to have today. But I want you to know you're not doomed to this fixed fate where you're just, forced to attract only this like destiny that doesn't feel so great. You have the power to control what you create. Within certain limitations, it's still going to be within your story, but you can live out a really awesome version of your story, and you have power over that. When you are born, that magnetic monopole takes up residence in your heart, and your design crystal actually takes up residence in the ajna center, just informing. Now, to make it even more interesting, when we look at human design and families, what we see is that we have built into the idea of families and generations, we have built in generational energy patterns. So you actually inherit elements of your design from your grandparents, and your children will inherit elements of their design from your parents, which sort of sets in motion this, every other generation is expressing certain themes, and you are getting the opportunity to experience those themes from your parents first as a child, and then through as a parent yourself through your own children. And it starts to become kind of interesting to note how you can have intergenerational energy patterns that can take sometimes many, many generations, if it's a dysfunctional pattern, to clear and restore to a healthy expression. It also becomes kind of beautiful when you think about the potential for healing our own heart and soul within the context of our family dynamic, that our families are very intentional creations that serve to give us lessons that support our growth and evolution for good or for bad, whichever you depend how you might see it. Now, when we look at the chart and we look at the numbers in the chart, and when you look at your chart, you have black numbers on the right, red numbers on the left, and those will be expressed as red or black or checkered lines on your actual chart. The red lines, or the red numbers, which are the red lines are derived from the red numbers, are the design of what's called your unconscious, or the design that carries the code for your life story, your design crystal. Okay? Your epigenetic code, clues to your ancestral memory, also lie within the design crystal code, or the unconscious design of the chart. So if you are feeling like you're living out an ancestral pattern, you might find evidence of that ancestral pattern in your unconscious design. I'm going to teach you some ways to look for some of the places where you get clues. But before we do that, I want to go a little bit deeper in helping you understand how to do this for yourself, so that over the weekend when you're bored, you can start interpreting your epigenetic code, right? On an archetypical level. The gates in actually every element in the human design chart represents an archetype. So a manifestor is an archetype. A generator is an archetype. A hermit is an archetype. Archetypes are simply neutral concepts, potentials, right? And in fact, Dr. Amiko Swami, the quantum physicist, who I have had the real pleasure of interviewing a couple of times, and I've actually had him here on the Quantum Alignment Show a couple of times. Dr. Amiko Swami refers to an aspect of the quantum field as being the realm of archetypes, right? It's the realm of archetypes that contain all the potential Earth stories, right? Our human design, modern astrology, represents the archetypes that we are configured or coded to explore more consistently over the course of our life. Your human design, everything that's colored in your chart, as well as everything that's open, by the way. The openness is a different way of exploring the archetypes in the chart, which is why I always say you have all the chart. I don't like it when people start telling me, well, I don't have this and I don't have that. You have all the chart. It's just you explore it in different ways. The openness, you explore through the openness themes. The definition is more consistent. So when you look at your chart and you look at the definition in your chart, that definition, the things that are colored in your chart, are sharing with you or helping you understand what archetypical themes are you more likely to explore and grow with over the course of your life. So, as I said, archetypes are neutral, right? And so if I say the word money, money is kind of a neutral archetype. I mean, it is a neutral archetype. I say the word money, and immediately, you probably start a whole pre-programmed, really nicely worn neural pathway of thoughts and feelings around money. But money by itself, outside of the context of the meanings that you give it, is just a neutral concept. It's an exchange of value, right? Pretty much. Every time I say that, I get emails from people who are like, really want to dissect the archetype of money, and they don't like that I say it's an exchange of value. But for the sake of conversation, we'll just call it's an exchange of value. Now, money can have a lot of different ranges of expression, right? And it's the range of expression, that range of expression of money in your own personal life is determined by your conditioning and your own experiences of money. I say money and you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. That's a conditioned response in you around money, and it's based on a certain set of meanings that you have about money. And money tends to show up based on what kinds of meanings you have. If we look at a human design archetype, hermit is a great one to look at. A hermit in human design, which is the second line energy. A hermit in one expression, if you're going to look at this on a sliding scale, in one expression, like an extreme expression on the left-hand side of the scale, a hermit might be a recluse, Boo Radley and To Kill a Mockingbird, right? The social hideout, the person that's hiding out and does not want to have anything to do with anybody, right? And disappears and hides. On the other extreme, we have what I'll say is burnout. If you're a hermit and you don't take the balanced expression of the hermit energy, which is self-renewal, alone time for self-renewal, then you may tend to burn out, especially because I find that people who carry hermit energy are usually very sensitive. And that hermit energy is in your chart to give you structure around needing alone time for self-renewal so that you don't burn out from other people's energies or from going too far yourself with your own energy. So in between those two extremes, there's a balanced expression of the archetype hermit. When we understand the nature of the archetypes in the chart, it allows us to very consciously and very deliberately begin to explore those archetypes so that we can begin to live out the archetypes in a much more balanced and appropriate way, in a way that ultimately allows us to sustain and use our energy and express our highest potential, which is really the gift of knowing your chart and knowing the archetypes that you are embodying in your chart. The more balanced expression we have of the archetypes in our chart, meaning the more you live in a balanced way with all the energies in your chart, the greater the sense of well-being that you have in your life increases. You experience a state that is actually called, I use this word a lot because it's my word for the week, eudaimonia. Eudaimonia. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? That sounds like a terrible word, eudaimonia. Eudaimonia actually means, and there's really not a good English word, it's actually a Greek word, but it actually means a sense of purpose, meaning, and satisfaction. It's not happiness necessarily. Sometimes people translate it happiness, but happiness is on the emotional solar plexus, and everything on the solar plexus has waves, right? It's really rooted in a greater sense of satisfaction and meaning and purpose all the way around. And there are, when psychologists do research around measuring eudaimonia, they have very specific testing criteria to define eudaimonia. What we know from epigenetics is that when people live in a high state of eudaimonia, meaning when their lives have a greater sense of purpose and meaning, not only do they feel better, they are more likely to take actions that maintain and sustain their health and well-being. So going back to this chart, they do all those things that help regulate gene expression. They eat better, they sleep well, they take care of themselves so their immune system stays strong, so they are more resilient around disease exposure. They try to avoid toxic chemicals as best as possible. They don't take recreational drugs. They take care of their finances. They exercise. Their microbiome is healthy because they're eating healthier. They have friends. They're healthy, right? People who experience eudaimonia are healthy because they make lifestyle choices that promote a high level of expression of gene regulation. What we know too is that when we look at eudaimonia, people who live in a state of eudaimonia actually up-level their gene regulators that affect the experience of inflammation. And people who live in a state of eudaimonia have a lower inflammation response to physiology and injury, meaning that they're not living in a constant state of inflammation. And a constant state of inflammation can trigger disease, can trigger tissue destruction, can trigger fatigue, can trigger adrenal collapse. People who are in a state of eudaimonia are healthier on a genetic level. It influences their gene expression, not just from lifestyle choices, but the actual state of being in a state of eudaimonia, having a sense of meaning, regulates your DNA in such a way that you decrease inflammation in your body. So when you're taking your turmeric, I want you to also get out your human design chart and start looking at the archetypes in that human design chart and start asking yourself, how can I release any of the stories that I'm holding that are keeping me from experiencing less than a balanced approach or maybe an overzealous approach to the archetypes in my chart? That's an important part of gene regulation. Now, here's the next piece that I want to invite you to explore. Do you have patterns in your life right now around how you're living and what you're experiencing that you would like to shift? And I'm actually going to give you I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Okay. I'll set my little timer, 30 seconds. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just make a bullet list. What patterns do you have in your life right now that you'd like to shift? And it can be about anything, money, relationships, etc. Just go. 30 seconds. Okay, so my connection to the time-space continuum is so wonky today. I set the timer for 30 minutes, but we're not going to wait 30 minutes. All right. So one of the things that I want you to ask yourself, and I really want to encourage you to, we're doing this sort of in a short-term, exercise for the day. I really want to encourage you to take this exercise into your contemplative practice this weekend and really sit with this for a little bit. Because I think you're going to find that it's very powerfully insightful, and it will give you some new ways to really look at how are you living out your chart and how are you living your life. When you start to look at the patterns that you listed, I want you to explore for yourself for a moment, do these patterns belong to you? Is there a history of this pattern in your family? Your ancestral memories on a cellular level can program your perception and your resilience to life in a very interesting way. So we know, for example, that if you are the grandchild, and by the way, this tends to affect grandchildren more than children. Anytime there's a trauma in a family history and a lineage, it's the grandchildren and beyond that tend to experience it more. So we know from studies now that grandchildren and great grandchildren of Holocaust survivors are more prone to anxiety disorders because they come from an ancestral memory of being in a state of high anxiety, right? We know that when people undergo generations of starvation, that consequent generations are smaller and tougher, and that after that, they actually get larger. So there's a relationship between height and weight and your ancestral memories of famine. Okay. I have a friend who's doing research on the relationship between people's attitudes about money and fears about money, who have families who grew up in the Dust Bowl in West Texas. So they are the grandchildren and the great grandchildren of people who were living in West Texas during the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression. And looking at the relationship between fear of losing money and ancestral memories. This exploration can be powerfully revelatory. And when I went and I did this work myself, one of the things that I discovered was that in my family is Jewish. And my family during World War II purchased a false identity in Germany and lived with this false identity and were able to survive they never were taken to the concentration camps. They were able to survive in out in normal society. I don't know if it's normal society, but they were able to survive and not be taken to concentration camps, and were literally able to hide in plain sight. When I looked at this story of hiding in plain sight as being part of my ancestral memory, it really helped me explore more deeply places where in my own professional life, I've kind of set an interesting and strange glass ceiling around my own visibility. I am living in I'm doing work that has a lot of visibility to it. And it took me a long time to get over the anxiety about being seen. It also took me a long time to explore the idea of me being out in the world, being seen, but not really being seen, and literally hiding in plain sight. So there's a lot of depth to me exploring that story. And it certainly was a really, really important piece that dropped in for me about understanding why I feel the way that I feel around my own visibility. I want you to explore this weekend if any of the patterns that you're living out in your life, particularly those patterns that you feel really stuck in, and maybe you keep bumping up against and you can't quite figure out, where is this coming from? I thought I've resolved this. Is there a history of this pattern in your family? And are you vicariously through your ancestral memories carrying this pattern because it's your turn to heal it for your family legacy? When we look at the planets in the human design chart or in astrology, and I know I'm going to get emails about this too. I know there's definitely a lot of conversation about Saturn. Is Saturn masculine or feminine? Some people think Saturn is feminine. Some people think Saturn is feminine, is masculine, feminine. Play with that one. But generally speaking, this is general. It's totally okay if you want to interpret it your own way. I think the way you interpret it is going to be the right way you interpret it for yourself. So I wouldn't lock yourself too solidly into this, but traditionally astrology teaches that Mercury is a masculine planet, Venus is a feminine planet, the moon is a feminine celestial body, Mars is very masculine, like the most masculine planet, Jupiter is neutral, Saturn is masculine, Chiron is neutral, Pluto is sometimes considered to be the great grandmother. um, there's definitely, Neptune is also sometimes considered to be very feminine. I think I got them all. Uranus is masculine. Uranus is not on here. Uranus is masculine. So when we look at the planets and the quality of the energy of their expression, and then we go back to our epigenetic code in the chart, it also gives us some insights as to maybe which side of your lineage does this epigenetic code come from. Now, in traditional human design, we teach, if you look at your Venus energy and you are a person who is attracted to women, whatever's in your Venus energy is going to explain a lot about what you're attracted to in your relationships with women. If you are a person who is attracted to men, we look at Mars to look at what are the values and what are the things you're attracted to in your Mars energy. If we look at the epigenetic code in the chart and we look at the planets and we look at particularly the challenging planets, such as Mars, which tends to be a challenging planet, Saturn, which can be a challenging planet, Chiron, which can be a challenging planetoid. When we look at the challenging planets, we start to see clues to what might be challenging us on an epigenetic level. What might we have carried forward from our ancestral lineage? And it gives us an opportunity to also explore from a gender perspective, is there a person in your family who is masculine or feminine who may have brought this theme to you in your life? So, for example, in this particular chart, we have Saturn in the epigenetic code, and Saturn is in the gate 4. So this Saturn in the gate 4 energy gives us a challenge around answers, right? And a need for certainty, and to a certain degree, a fear when there isn't certainty. So this person could potentially have an epigenetic code that says when they don't know what's next, when they're not prepared, when they don't have everything lined up and organized and ready to go, they may have a lot of fear or anxiety around how to take action, how to be in the world without multiple backup plans. And that could create a tremendous amount of anxiety for someone. And that anxiety might not have anything to do with you. In fact, when we look at this chart, this person is a third line energy. This person is designed to experiment and explore. But if this Saturn energy, this needing to be certain, is interfering with the expression of experience in the third line profile, it could create a very interesting conflict. There are a lot of different ways that you can explore releasing some of these old patterns. I personally believe that using the quantum alignment system, which is a system that integrates human design, subtle body therapies, and the emotional freedom techniques, both which has an enormous, or I would say, rapidly growing body of science around its efficacy, is a really powerful way to get in there and start looking at how do you maybe need to release some of this ancestral memory so that you can change and shift your gene expression and create a higher state of eudaimonia. If you are interested in exploring that, please go to our website, quantumalignmentsystem.com. You can find quantum alignment system practitioners there, and they are amazing. They will know exactly by looking at your chart where they need to zero in and explore what they can do to help you release some of these energies. If you have Saturn in the gate 4, and this is part of your ancestral memory, it's going to give you a lot of challenges with being decisive in your life and knowing how to make good and strong choices. And that decisiveness is going to oftentimes interfere with your ability to be effective. It can even burn you out because you'll be so worried and freaked out about making a decision. It could fry your circuits. Knowing how to get in here and rewrite the story is really, really powerful because it helps you move into a greater alignment with not only your life that you're living right now, but it actually allows you to heal this issue, wherever this might be. This could be rooted in who knows what kind of a story, right? It allows you to heal this energy in all directions of time, back and forth across your ancestral lineage, and allows you to influence positively what you're putting back into the earth. When you die, your design crystal goes back into the earth ready to be worn by somebody else, like an old suit, right? You clean up the suit in this lifetime, you put it back into the planet. Not only are you leaving it available for somebody else to put it on, some other soul to put it on and have a better experience, you're also changing the collective biology of the planet. I mean, the collective gene code of the planet. Okay, you're affecting the work you do in this lifetime changes the future of the human gene code. And you have the potential through your choices to make the gene code available to the future to be healthier, more resilient, more vital. And hopefully create better, juicier, more fun, creative, sustainable, peaceful things with our human story. So here's the invitation that I want to give you guys. Take this weekend and connect with your ancestors. You know, either using your journal or your imagination or meditation. Imagine for a moment all of your ancestors standing behind you and ask them, hey, talk to them, say, hey, I've got this pattern going on. And I feel like some parts of this pattern don't belong to me. Does it belong to any of you? And if it does belong to you, can you step forward, please? Because we need to talk, right? Then I want you to have a conversation with your ancestor. Ask your ancestor, what do you need to know? What do you need to know from your ancestor? What message do they have for you? What information do they have for you? What story do they have for you that can help you understand what's going on in your life with this pattern? Is there anything that they need from you? In particular, is there anything that they need that's going on with them that they need to be forgiven? Sometimes it's the unforgiveness of themselves or their regrets that keep them stuck in the story and keep the story replicating itself through your ancestral lineage. So is there anything that needs to be forgiven? And do they have anything they can bring to you? Do they have any skills to teach you or gifts that they can bring you that can help you move forward in your own life? I just think this is a powerful thing to do through either meditative writing or what is it called? Automatic writing. So journaling with this, but even doing this in a meditation is a contemplation. Even thinking about it before you go to sleep and seeing if you can get any dream time on it is really, really powerful. And of course, do this in conjunction with your chart. Get your chart out and look at what planetary positions are there in your chart that are, potentially challenging. Look particularly at Mars. Look particularly at Saturn. Look particularly at Chiron. Look at what's in your Mercury. Are you having struggles with communicating? What's in the definition in the epigenetic code of your Mercury, your communication planet? And then really, take my book, Understanding Human Design, and look at the themes of each of the gates and explore, is there a family history around this archetype that is coming up for you in this lifetime that's part of you needing or you being asked by your ancestral lineage to bring forth to heal so that you can clear this for your ancestors on an ancestral level. And here's the cool part, you start to clear this, you start to balance out the expression of this archetype in your own life. Not only do you feel better, not only do you clear this ancestral lineage, right? You actually will up-level your gene regulation. You will become healthier. Your life will be created from a greater state of meaning and purpose. And you have the potential to increase the quality of eudaimonia in your life in many, many ways. All right, good. So it's new stuff. It's exciting stuff. I think it's a really, really, I will say that for me personally, looking at my chart with this point of view has taught me a lot about places where I have been hung up and stuck. And I think, I hope that you all gain the same quality of insights that I'm intending for you to get, because I think, you all deserve to be living the full expression of the truth of who you are. You came here for a reason, and you came here intentionally to occupy this beautiful story that you're living. And you owe it to yourself, because you deserve it, to live a magnificent eudaimonia filled life. And so I hope that this gives you a different way, a different perspective to step into the opening of living the highest possibility for yourself. So, you all take good care of yourselves. Have a great weekend. Bye.